There's a play in football called the draw. It looks like a pass play. The quarterback drops back in the pocket. The offensive linemen retreat to pass block. The defense reads pass and rushes. And then just as the pass rush commits, the quarterback hands the ball to a running back who runs straight through a gap that the defense just vacated. The draw works because the defense sees what it expects to see. It responds to the appearance of the play and not the reality of it. Big Pharma runs a version of the draw. Every time a drug's patent is about to expire, every time competition is about to show up and drive prices down, every time the American patient is about to catch a break, they make it look like one thing, and then they do another. Today, I'm going to walk you through their playbook, play by play. I'm going to give you names. I'm going to give you numbers with the documented proof that this is not a coincidence or an accident or a natural feature of the pharmaceutical market. It's strategy, it's deliberate, and it's been executed on the two biggest selling drugs in the history of the American pharmaceutical industry. And right now, today, it is being executed again on a drug that generated nearly $30 billion in revenue last year. The play is already in motion. The question is whether anyone's going to blow the whistle. Welcome back to Bust Big Pharma. I'm Rob Burgess, and I want to start today with a principle that I believe in very deeply. Competition works. This is not a complicated idea. It is the foundation of the American free market and the source of most of the prosperity this country has generated for 2.5 centuries. When multiple companies compete for your business, they have to earn it. They have to offer you a better product at a better price than the company sitting next to them. The ones who do that well succeed. The ones who don't get replaced. Consumers ultimately win, the economy improves, and innovation accelerates. That system works in automobiles, it works in electronics, it works in food and clothing and software, and virtually every other sector of the American economy. And it can work in pharmaceuticals if the pharmaceutical industry would let it. Because here's what the data shows consistently. Every time genuine competition enters a pharmaceutical market, prices fall. Drastically. When a brand name drug loses its patent protection and generics enter the market, prices can drop anywhere from 50 to 85%, sometimes more. The American patient who has been paying monopoly prices for years suddenly pays a fraction of what they were paying. That is the free market working exactly as it should. Which is precisely why the pharmaceutical industry has spent decades and billions of dollars making sure it doesn't happen. Not by competing better, not by innovating faster, but by gaming the patent system, by filing hundreds of redundant, overlapping, legally questionable patents on a single drug to build a wall that no competitor can breach, by paying would-be competitors to stay out of the market, by making minor cosmetic changes to existing drugs and relaunching them with new patents before old ones expire, by filing baseless complaints with the FDA to delay generic approvals. Together, these tactics have a name. Researchers call it evergreening. Industry critics call it patent abuse. I call it what it is, a coordinated strategy to deny American patients the benefits of the free market they were promised. And today we're going to go through the playbook move by move. We're going to look at that completed case study, the most documented example in pharmaceutical history, and then we're going to watch the exact same play being run right now in real time on the world's current biggest selling drug. Because once you see how this play works, you cannot watch it unfold without recognizing it. Before we get into the specific cases, let me define the 4 moves in the playbook because they show up again and again and again, although in different combinations, on different drugs by different companies. But the architecture is always the same. Move 1, and we've talked about this one before, the patent thicket. A drug's original patent, the patent on the active molecule, the actual scientific discovery, has a finite life. 20 years from the filing date is the standard protection. After that, competitors are legally entitled to make a generic version and sell it at a lower price. The patent thicket is how companies prevent that from happening. Instead of relying on the original patent, they file hundreds of additional patents covering everything tangentially related to the drug. the manufacturing process, the dosage form, the delivery mechanism, the packaging, the specific concentration, the potential future formulations that haven't even been developed yet. The goal is not to protect genuine innovation. The goal is to surround the drug with so many overlapping legal claims that any competitor trying to enter the market faces the prospect of years of expensive litigation over patents that may be weak or invalid. But they're too numerous and too costly to challenge all at once. The second act is pay for delay. Sometimes, despite the patent thicket, a generic manufacturer manages to develop a competing product and file for FDA approval. At that point, the brand name company has a choice. It can fight the challenge in court, which it might lose, or it can pay the challenger to go away. Literally, the brand name company and the generic manufacturer enter into a settlement agreement in which the generic company receives a payment, sometimes cash, sometimes a licensing arrangement, sometimes other forms of value, in exchange for agreeing not to launch their competing product for a period of years. The brand name company maintains its monopoly, the generic company gets paid to stay out, and the American patient keeps paying full freight on prices for drugs. Move 3, product hopping. When a drug's core patents are about to expire, no amount of thicket building or pay for delay can hold off competition indefinitely. The company introduces a slightly modified version of the same drug, a new formulation, a new delivery method, an extended release version, a slightly different concentration, something that is different enough to carry new patents, but not different enough to represent a genuine medical advancement. Then the company aggressively shifts patients through the doctor outreach program, the insurance negotiations, and marketing to the new version before the old patents expire. By the time biosimilars and generics arrive to compete with the old formulation, most patients are already on the new one. The competition has nowhere to go. And the last move that is happening is FDA abuse. The FDA has a process by which companies can file citizen petitions, formal complaints requesting that the agency delay or deny a competitor's generic approval on safety or scientific grounds. In legitimate cases, this is an important public health safeguard. In the hands of a company trying to protect its monopoly, it becomes a delay tactic. Companies file petitions that the FDA ultimately rejects as meritless, but not before the review process consumes months of time during which the competitor's product sits in regulatory limbo and the brand name company continues to collect monopoly revenue. 4 moves. Patent thicket, pay for delay, product hopping, FDA abuse. That's the playbook. Now let's watch it get run. The most thoroughly documented example of this playbook in American pharmaceutical history is the management of a drug called Humira. Humira is an anti-inflammatory drug used to treat rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and a range of other autoimmune conditions. It was first approved by the FDA in 2002, and over the next 2 decades, it became the best-selling drug in the history of the world. Not the best-selling drug in America, the best-selling drug on Earth. By 2021, it was generating over $20 billion in annual revenue. Over its lifetime, Humira has brought in more than $200 billion. $200 billion from a single drug. Now, the core patent on Humira's active ingredient expired on December 31st, 2016. Under the normal operation of the patent system, that expiration should have been the moment when competition arrived, when biosimilar versions entered the market, when prices began to fall. That is what the system is designed to produce. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen in 2016. It didn't happen in 2017 or 2018, 2019, 2020, or even 2021 or 2022. Biosimilar competition did not arrive in the United States until 2023, 6 years after the core patent expired. How? Because all 4 moves of the playbook were executed. On the patent thicket, there were approximately 250 patents on Humira. 130 were granted. Critically, 90% of those patent applications were filed after the drug had already been approved and was on the market in 2002. More than half were filed after 2013 in direct anticipation of the approaching core patent expiration. The patents covered manufacturing processes, formulations, concentrations, and delivery methods, not the underlying science, but every surrounding element that a competitor would need to touch to bring a biosimilar to the market. A 3-year investigation by the U.S. House Committee on Oversight and Reform concluded in December of 21 that this patent strategy was, in the committee's words, particularly abusive because it sought to overwhelm potential competitors with the sheer number of patents on Humira, regardless of whether individual patents were properly granted. The committee noted bluntly, if one patent is invalidated, there was another one waiting. 74 patents were thrown at competitors in litigation alone. In terms of the pay for delay part of the playbook, the pharmaceutical company that owns Humira entered into settlement agreements with 9 competitors, 6 of which had had FDA approval on biosimilars, effectively paying them to delay market entry until January of 2023. The company that owns Humira's own internal documents obtained by the House Oversight Committee estimated that if lower-priced biosimilars had entered the market in the first quarter of 2017, as the patent system intended, U.S. net revenue would have dropped by $1.5 billion in that year alone. Based on those internal projections, the introduction of competitive biosimilars would have saved the U.S. healthcare system at least $19 billion between 2016 and 2023. $19 billion kept in a pharmaceutical company's pocket by pay-for-delay agreements with the very competitors who should have been driving prices down. When you look at the product hopping version of the playbook, they launched what is called a citrate-free formulation of Humira in 2018. This version has less injection site discomfort, and they aggressively shifted their patients to it before the biosimilar wave arrived. By the time competitors finally entered the market in 2023, they were competing primarily with a formulation that patients were already being told to move away from. The numbers confirm the result. U.S. Humira sales of $21.24 billion in 2022, the last full year of the monopoly pricing. In 2023, after biosimilars arrived, sales dropped to $14 billion. And in 2024, it was $8.99 billion. That collapse in revenue from over $21 billion to under $9 billion in 2 years is what competition does. That is the free market working. That is what American patients should have experienced starting in 2017. The 6-year delay cost American patients and taxpayers roughly $75 billion in excess revenue collected between the core patent expiration and the arrival of real competition. $75 billion. And it came on the back of patients with rheumatoid arthritis and Crohn's disease, people with chronic, painful, and debilitating conditions who need this drug and had no alternative. People who paid $77,000 a year for a medication whose core patent had expired. That's the completed case. That's the playbook, fully documented by congressional investigation in the company's own internal documents. Now let's look at who's running the same play right now. The world's currently best-selling drug is called Keytruda, and it's made by Merck. It's a cancer immunotherapy, a PD-1 inhibitor, used to treat dozens of different types of cancer, and has been genuinely transformative for patients with certain cancers where it produces remarkable results. In 2024, Keytruda generated $29.5 billion in global revenue, $29.5 billion in 1 year from one drug. The core patents on Keytruda's intravenous formulation expire in 2028, so just 2 years from now. And Merck is already starting to launch the playbook. Let's start with patent thicket. According to research from the Initiative for Medicines Access and Knowledge, IMAC, a respected drug patent research organization, Merck has filed nearly 300 patent applications on Keytruda, nearly 300. More than half of them were filed after the drug received its initial FDA approval. IMAC has found that Merck filed over 100 new patent applications and secured almost 30 additional patents since their review in 2022. The thicket is actively being built right now in real time as the 2028 expiration date approaches. The co-founder of IMAC testified before Congress about the Humira thicket, said this about Keytruda. It is the way pharmaceutical companies use the system. It is all about taking up as much space as possible, making it difficult for anybody to enter. And he said plainly, Keytruda is going to be the next Humira by all accounts. the next Humira by the man who documented Humira. Now let's talk about the product hop, because this is where Merck's strategy becomes not just visible but brazen. Keytruda is currently administered as an intravenous infusion. Patients go to a clinic or a hospital and they sit down for about 30 minutes and receive the drug through an IV. In 2025, Merck launched a subcutaneous version, an injection that can be administered in about 5 minutes. The FDA approved it in September of 2025. Now, subcutaneous delivery is genuinely more convenient for patients. It's faster. It's less disruptive to their lives. That is a real patient benefit, and it would be dishonest to pretend otherwise. But Bloomberg Law, not an advocacy group, one of the most respected legal news organizations in the country, called Merck's move a rare, real-time product hop. And here's why. The subcutaneous version of Keytruda is protected by its own set of newer patents, extending exclusivity potentially into the 2040s. IMAC identified 2 patents on the formulation that include method of treatment and manufacturing process claims that could extend exclusivity into 2042. Keytruda's core patents expire in 2028. This new version could be protected until 2042. That is 14 additional years of monopoly pricing on a drug that generates nearly $30 billion a year in revenue. And Merck's CEO, in a moment of candor that his legal team must have winced at, confirmed the strategy himself. He was speaking to investors, and CEO Rob Davis said that the new version could capture 30 to 40% of Keytruda's U.S. patient base, turning what he called the looming patent cliff into, and I want to make sure I get this right, more of a hill. The CEO of Merck told his investors that the product hop designed to soften the impact of a patent expiration, not to help patients, was more of a hill and would protect revenue. His words to investors in a legally recorded statement. Bloomberg Intelligence has estimated that without this new product, Merck faced a $59 billion revenue exposure from Keytruda by 2030. The entire point of the new formulation in Merck's own investor communications is to reduce that exposure. And IMAC estimates that Americans will spend at least $137 billion on Keytruda during its extended exclusivity period, not counting the additional impact of the new patent strategy. $137 billion extra dollars on a single cancer drug, paid by American patients and taxpayers. While the company executing this strategy tells Congress it's committed to affordability and innovation. Now, I want to go back and dive into the second move of the playbook separately because it deserves its own examination. It deserves its own section. The entire pay for delay concept. The concept, as I described it earlier, is simple. A brand name drug company pays a generic manufacturer to stay out of the market. In exchange for not competing, the generic company receives a cash payment, a licensing arrangement, or some other form of value from the very competitor they were about to undercut. This has been challenged in court. The Supreme Court addressed it in a 2013 case, the Federal Trade Commission versus activists, finding that some of these settlement agreements are potentially anti-competitive and subject to antitrust scrutiny. The FTC has been pushing back on these arrangements for years. And here's what the Federal Trade Commission, not an advocacy group, the federal government's own antitrust enforcement agency, has estimated about the cost of pay for delay arrangements to the American patients and taxpayers. It's worth about $3.5 billion a year. Every year, reliably, year after year, because brand name companies have found that paying a generic competitor to delay is more cost effective than fighting them in court and risking a loss that lets competition into the market. $3.5 billion annually flowing out of American patients' pockets and into the coffers of companies that have paid their competitors not to compete. And this is all the more egregious when you look at the Humira case. 9 separate pay-for-delay settlements with 9 separate competitors, all of them agreeing to stay out of the Humira market until 2023, all of them receiving value in various forms in exchange for that agreement. The pharmaceutical company who owns Humira's own internal analysis said that without those settlements, competition would have arrived in 2017, and it would have saved the healthcare system at least $19 billion over 6 years. So they paid their competitors. They paid them to protect a monopoly that was costing Americans $19 billion over 6 years. The math on that deal is obvious. The math on that deal from the American patient's perspective is an outrage, and it's currently legal. So let's step back and let's try to put a number on all of this, because the specific figures are striking, but the overall picture is staggering. The 6-year delay in Humira biosimilar competition cost American patients and taxpayers approximately $75 billion in excess revenue after its core patent expired. Pay for delay agreements cost the American health system an estimated $3.5 billion a year, according to the FTC. IMAC estimates that Keytruda's extended exclusivity, without even accounting for the new product hop, will cost Americans at least $137 billion. And the Congressional Budget Office estimated that the Affordable Prescriptions for Patients Act, bipartisan legislation specifically designed to crack down on patent thickets, which passed the Senate unanimously in July of 2024 and was reintroduced in 2025, would save $1.8 billion just from that one reform, just from addressing one piece of the playbook. In the broader picture, when generic competition finally arrives in a pharmaceutical market, it typically drives prices down 80 to 85% compared to the brand name monopoly price. Every year that competition is delayed, American patients pay full freight monopoly price. Every year delay is a year of maximum extraction. This is not a side issue. This is not a minor inefficiency in an otherwise functional market. This is a systematic, documented, legally sophisticated strategy to deny Americans the benefits of a free market that they are entitled to and promised. And it is being executed right now on cancer drugs by a company whose CEO just told investors the strategy is designed to turn a patent cliff into a hill. Now, like everything, Big Pharma has a defense. Several of them, in fact. So I'm going to take each one seriously because they deserve serious answers. You've heard me say that time and time again. The first argument is that secondary patents protect real innovation. Big Pharma argues that formulation patents, manufacturing process patents, and delivery method patents protect legitimate improvements to the original drug. A less painful injection site, a more stable formulation, a more convenient delivery mechanism. These are real improvements, they say. Real improvements deserve patent protection. The answer is some of them might, and those specific innovations should be protected. The problem is not that companies improve their drugs and patent the improvements. The problem is that companies file hundreds of patents on improvements that are not innovations. They're obvious, they're incremental, legally questionable modifications filed not to protect science, but to build a legal barrier that is too expensive and time-consuming for any competitor to fully overcome. And that's what the House Oversight Committee noted in its Humira investigation. And they noted this. When the CEO of the company that owns Humira was pressed by lawmakers on whether the company's later patents were, in the language of patent law, novel and non-obvious, the standard for a legitimate patent, he could not explain why they met that standard. He affirmed that they dedicated significant research budget to extending its monopoly on Humira, not to developing new drugs, but to protecting the old one. And a patent expert testified before the exact same committee saying it plainly. The pharmaceutical company doesn't need all these patents, but it is a great way to keep competition at bay. Their second defense is that settlements benefit patients by bringing biosimilars to market sooner than litigation would. This is the argument that pay-for-delay agreements actually help patients because without the settlement, litigation could drag on for years and no biosimilar would reach the market at all. Better for some competition eventually than a legal battle with uncertain outcome. That argument might hold water if the settlements didn't involve payments, but they do. The Supreme Court specifically identified the size of the payment as the key indicator of anti-competitive intent. When a brand name company pays a generic company to delay, rather than simply licensing the drug or agreeing on a reasonable entry date, then the payment itself is evidence that the brand name company knows it would lose in court. You do not pay someone to go away unless you are afraid of what happens if they stay. The third defense, the new formulation for Keytruda is a genuine patient benefit. And this is where I'm probably going to be the most careful, because this defense probably has the most merit. This subcutaneous injection is genuinely more convenient than intravenous infusion. It's faster. It's less disruptive. For cancer patients managing multiple treatments and appointments, 5 minutes versus 30 minutes is not a trivial difference. It's a true benefit. Even Bloomberg Law described Merck's move as a product hop, not an innovation, because the clinical benefit is in the delivery method, not in the medicine. The drug's efficacy is the same. The active compound is identical. And Merck's CEO confirmed in investor communications that the primary purpose of the new formulation is to protect revenue from the approaching patent cliff. He didn't say we launched this because patients needed it. He said we're turning a cliff into a hill. Genuine innovation is developed because it helps patients. Product hop is developed because it extends monopolies. The difference is in the intent, confirmed by the company's own executive in their own words. So the good news is this, and there truly is genuinely good news, this is not an unsolvable problem. The tools to address this exist. Some of them have already passed by one chamber of Congress with bipartisan support. The question is simply political will. On patent thickets, the Affordable Prescriptions for Patients Act, introduced by Republican Senator John Cornyn of Texas and Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal, passed the Senate unanimously in July of 2024. Unanimously. Not a party line vote, not a close call. Every senator voted yes. The bill targets patent thickets directly, creating a legal mechanism to challenge excessive secondary patents that have no genuine innovative value. The Congressional Budget Office scored it at $1.8 billion in savings. It was just reintroduced last year. It needs to move. On product hopping, Senator Cornyn and Senator Blumenthal also introduced the Drug Competition Enhancement Act, specifically targeting product hop strategies that shift patients to reformulated drugs before patent expiration. Not because the reformulation is medically superior, but because the timing protects monopoly revenue. This too has bipartisan support. This too is stalled. It needs to move. On pay for delay, the FTC has been pressing antitrust cases against the most egregious pay for delay arrangement since the Supreme Court's ruling in 2013. And it gave them clear authority to do this. Congress can strengthen that authority. It can make the payments themselves presumptively anti-competitive, removing the current case-by-case analysis that allows companies to structure their settlements to barely stay within the legal line while achieving the same anti-competitive result. And on FDA citizen petition abuse, the FDA already has the authority to expedite review of petitions it determines are filed primarily to delay competition rather than to raise legitimate public health concerns. Congress can reinforce that authority and create consequences for companies that file petitions with the FDA that they subsequently determine were meritless. None of these reforms require the government to set prices. None of these reforms require the government to set drug pricing. None of them involve price controls. All of them are designed to restore the free market competition that the patent system was supposed to enable. Competition that pharmaceutical companies have spent decades and billions of dollars systematically preventing. That's the conservative argument. That's the America First argument. It is the free market argument. It is an argument that Senator Cornyn, a conservative Republican from Texas, not a progressive reformer, has made with his own name on legislation. And it's an argument that 100 United States senators supported when they voted unanimously to pass the Affordable Prescriptions for Patients Act. It's an argument that the House needs to act on now. So I'm going to close today's episode with this. I believe in the patent system. I believe in intellectual property protection. I believe that companies which take genuine risks and produce genuine breakthroughs deserve a period of market exclusivity that allows them to earn a return on their investment. That is not a complicated position. It is foundational American. Risk should be rewarded. What I do not believe in is that the patent system was designed to be a mechanism for perpetual monopolies. It wasn't. The founders of this republic, who wrote patent protection into the Constitution itself, understood that exclusivity is a temporary grant, a reward for innovation, not a permanent right. The explicit purpose of the patent system is to eventually allow competition, to let the market work, to let prices fall, to let patients benefit. Humira is protected by 250 patents, 9 pay-for-delay settlements, and a product hop to deny American patients that benefit for 6 years. The cost was $75 billion, and it was taken off the backs of people with rheumatoid arthritis and Crohn's disease. Merck is running an identical play on Keytruda right now, nearly 300 patent applications on a product hop launched before the end of their patent expiration, and a CEO who told investors that the strategy is designed to turn a patent cliff into a hill that American cancer patients are going to have to climb for another decade at a list price of over $200,000 a year. The play is in motion. The Senate's already voted unanimously for legislation that would blow it up. The House needs to act. And the American people need to know that the free market they were promised in pharmaceuticals, the competition that would drive prices down, the generics that would make medication affordable, the system that rewards genuine innovation rather than patent lawyers is being systematically stolen from them by an industry that has turned gaming the rules into a business model. That can end when Congress decides to end it. This is Bust Big Pharma. I'm Rob Burgess. We'll be back next week.